Thank you, Iliam, for that talk, which will give us a lot of great themes to take up in discussion, and a number of which also lead into some of the things I think Marco is going to be taking up, who is our third speaker. That is the kind of relationship between the way in which the Canadian labour movement defines itself as a particular kind of economic nationalist sort of body, and defines who is part of the national working class or the national labour movement in particular ways that excludes whole bodies of workers. So Marco is our third speaker, Marco Luciano, who's worked both inside and outside the organized trade union movement in a variety of capacities as a staff rep for both Unite Here and currently for QP Local 1281. But he also was the co-founder of the Immigrant Workers Centre in Montreal, and he currently is a coordinator with Migranti Ontario. He's our third speaker.
I think before I start, I would like to just mention about Migrante. Migrante is a chapter of Migrante International, which is based in the Philippines and has about 120 chapters in different countries. And the organization was born out of the struggle for better working conditions for domestic workers, particularly during the time of the hanging of Flor Contemplacion, the maid that was hanged in Singapore back in 1995, the child that she was taking care of. But I guess to put the context to the sharing of the work that I did with the Immigrant Workers Centre in Migranti, Ontario, with more than 2 decades of neoliberal globalization and the renewed trend towards war, chauvinism, and fascism, the trends and patterns of migration reveal the intensifying exploitation and oppression of workers, migrants, and nations amidst the unsolved crisis of the world monopoly capitalism. And examples of these trends are the general use of foreign migrant labor for super profits under imperialism, and more recent use of migrants as a neo-colonial tool by keeping the countries under bondage through debt and trade investments and so on, while fostering independence on dollar remittances for economic survival of those countries. Also using migrants as trade and political leverage, and distorting national cultures and suppressing dissent. Some other trends are miserable working and living conditions under intensified exploitation, including the use of women migrant labor, discrimination and racism, and pitting workers basically against fellow workers. Some trends also are tougher immigration laws, immigration management, the war on terror, and even permanent residents are threatened by deportation. And recently, even here in Canada, the crackdown on undocumented workers. In Mississauga 2 weeks ago, 45 undocumented workers were picked up by the police and the border officials. 25 of them are Filipinos, working as caregivers. Because working as caregivers it's not enough for them to survive. They needed to work under the table. Now their status as caregivers are totally, gone down the drain. Also restricted integration of migrants and reunification of families in host countries. And this is seen in the recent conservative government's Bill C-50. And for Migrante, we look specifically and principally on the social conditions of sending countries like the Philippines. For example, Philippines are sending about 3,000 Filipinos working in 186 countries every day. And the Philippine government's labor export policy fits perfectly to the demands of cheap labor of countries of the north like Canada. And in organizing, Migrante's organizing work, we sort of narrow down in terms in 3 strategic points that guide us in our organizing work. First is solving the basic problems underlying migration from labor-sending countries. For example, Philippines we see that a lot of Filipinos here, if you ask them, they wouldn't leave their country if there's work, if there is something for them to survive. So there is definitely, they were forced to migrate. Addressing that issues and solving the basic problems that caused the Philippines to be poor and stay that way. And in doing so also supports the national liberation of the Filipino people against neo-colonial, particularly the U.S. imperialism. Second is to defend and assert the rights and welfare of migrant in labor receiving countries like Canada in order to provide services to Filipino migrants and immigrants. We try to address those issues by addressing the weaknesses in the labor laws in the receiving countries, building alliances with unions. And thirdly is to unite with other migrants and host people in a common struggle against imperialism and local reaction. And this is done through building coalition, being part of alliances in Toronto in particular. When I was organizing in Montreal, organizing unions in Montreal, one of the difficulties in organizing and using the traditional organizing model that unions are used to do is to apply that to organizing migrant labor, organizing immigrants, and then workers of color. They would tell us that they come to Canada to work. They would tell us that they come to Canada and they're making a little bit more money than they make in their countries, in the Philippines, for example. And organizing, traditionally signing cards and organizing a union does not really work in those fashions. And what we got is really doors shutting down in our face, or fellow Filipinos really screaming at me at the same grocery store where I shop, the same Filipino video store that I rent videos, asking those questions and trying to understand why am I taking out or taking out work from them. Despite our efforts to change the model, the union doesn't seem to understand the relationship between the worker and their home country, or the worker and their community. We also saw the general lack of knowledge of the community on unionism. Those were the beginnings of the Immigrant Workers Center. It started as a Friday group where we meet workers every Friday in workers' homes. We would have film screenings, education that ranged from employment standards to the history of the Filipino migration to what is imperialism. That Friday group core grew to become the Immigrant Workers Center. The IWC, or the Immigrant Workers Center, is initially an education center that prepares them in the struggles during a union drive or a union campaign. We have run successful union drives and built union leaders from the community in doing that kind of model. The unions start to notice, and in 2001, CAW supported us and helped establish our first physical center by giving us a chunk of fund to put up this physical center. But of course, it's one time. They're a little cautious and it took us a while to get the support. One of the reasons being is that they see the center as a raiding center, that we are trying to solicit different unions, and therefore they don't want to be part of it because other unions are part of it. But in the end, they provide support, while the others kind of stay and watch. There was one time that we have organized a core of strong leaders from the factory that wanted to organize, about 400 workers. And what we did in the center is that we organized a whole day of, it's like, you know, when you're in a job, what do you got, committee to hire? Hiring committee. And there are candidates lining at the back of the other side of the door. What we did is the workers that would like to organize is in the room, and we call on unions, different unions, to actually line up and present themselves to these workers on what kind of service they can provide. And the workers actually get to choose what unions do they want to belong to. And so, and then from there, we became part of this. We got acknowledged in the labor movement. We got acknowledged in the community, and we become part in this never-ending bridging the gap between community and labor. Even academics are overly theorizing the community unionism. I don't quite get that.
Chris is nodding vigorously at the back.
What unions seem to be missing is providing political education that is badly needed by the workers. Skills training such as filling grievances and how to be a steward is great, but workers seem to miss out the point on why they signed the cards in the first place. And how being treated in their workplace is linked towards migration and globalization and other global issues. And one of the things that came up to my mind when Brother Ilya was talking about union solidarity is that I just can't imagine when workers start picketing or leafleting outside Walmart simultaneously with their subcontractor in the Philippines that's currently under attack, and simultaneously picketing. I mean, those are concrete examples of union solidarity that goes beyond exchanging of hats and pins. IWC also tries to struggle with issues on this so-called changing demographics, the new faces. These are the buzzwords in the labor community in the last 10 years. IWC believe that in the last 100 years, demographics has never stopped changing.
That's right.
We acknowledge the members that IWC are workers of colors, migrants, or immigrants, but our struggle is to have equal rights as Canadians. Some IWC members were victims of harassment and discrimination from fellow brothers and sisters. They say that we will take any jobs that comes on the table, and we are dragging the wages down. On the other hand, some IWC members are also become token immigrant during a union campaign, especially when there's press conferences. These are the struggles that we face at the center, and at the same time, aside from trying to survive as an organization without regular source of funding. On the other hand, we continue to believe that union is still better than no union. We continuously try to provide education on class struggle unionism and the importance of organized labor on the day-to-day economic struggles of workers. Through understanding the two characters of union being that unions are still the legitimate and strong organization of the working people, but on the other hand, it is an institution in the capitalist society whose weapons are limited to negotiations and concessions. This helps us work with them and yet ensure that the struggles and contradictions within the unions continue to exist and to continue to move forward. My work in Migrante is similar and yet different from IWC. It's similar because we share the same analysis with IWC on unionism and working with unions, and yet different because Migrante is focused on organizing Filipinos. Migrante believe that first and foremost, we must address the issues of social conditions that force us out of the Philippines. It's a little ironic that even though some of the members of the IWC would say that they were displaced when they were forced out of forced out by the military in their villages in the Philippines because there's a Canadian mining company that is doing exploration projects in their villages. And now they are here in Canada trying to fight their right to stay. I believe that unions really need to educate themselves and their membership politically. Issues such as deregulation, privatization of public services, plant closing, and so on should be linked to the global economy and also global trade of cheap labor. And I still believe that this can be done through step-by-step organizing and painstaking education in workplaces. And in moving forward, I believe that unions are also moving, slowly moving forward, addressing issues in the community. They have tried to organize sectors outside the traditional workplaces and traditional organizing models. Farm workers are being organized, taxi drivers, and recently the steel workers have shown interest in organizing the caregivers. These are positive efforts that are long overdue. However, community organizations that have been organizing in these communities, such as Justicia for Migrant Workers, No One is Illegal, and Migrante, and other organizations that have been at the forefront of the struggle must be respected and not ignored. And they actually should have strong links, and solidarity must be forged between union and these community groups. In our recent experience with Steels, it is that, yes, they are ready to organize and have the resources to do so, but it's the community organizations that have the membership, that know the people. So we also continue to struggle with them in making them understand that organizing caregivers is not simple. It's not as simple as signing union cards. It is to understand their conditions, their plight, but also understanding that live-in caregivers are forced to leave the Philippines. I'll end with a little story. I saw Brother Jojo Hieronimo, a friend and a comrade, who tells me a story about the preparation of a Labor Day parade, in which there was a meeting whereas an immigrant brother from Vietnam refuses or make comments about the planes that flew over the Labor Day parade. He said that, I don't like those planes. Those planes remind me of hardships, remind me of war, remind me of murdering my people. But another comrade who's been in the labor movement for a long time said, but those planes are made by the union members. Thank you.